what I find
I
is
hope that people do take that opportunity.
it is a beautiful invitation. Like, this is the perfect time to take up a practice.
It is.
Like, you have so many options of meditation that are either guided online with all the live options available right now. There's plenty of just pre-recorded ones available on YouTube. There's all kinds of books and things you can explore to dive into practice of meditation, mindfulness, introspection, like anything. Try anything and everything. There's no right or wrong way. The right way is going to be the way that you go with yourself and you explore.
Something is going to resonate with you. Something is going to pull your attention more than other things. Follow the thing that your attention goes for. Our natural reaction is usually the correct one. We'll go for what we have a natural penchant towards, and then we may be uncomfortable, so then we start exploring a bunch of other things instead. But your natural tendency will be towards what actually speaks to you in a language that you understand.
Yeah. What I'm finding is happening, at least when I'm hosting people in floats, you know, I think I've showed you this, like people are either like, there's extremes of like fully unconscious people to fully conscious people. And there's like a tipping point where all of a sudden people go from a point of living an unconscious life, not in a negative way, just they're not as present, they're not as intentional, they're not as deliberate. And all of a sudden they have an experience, a moment where they glimpse a more conscious existence. And all of a sudden it usually just lights a little fire in their belly of saying, I want to experience more life like that, because there's something about it. There's a bit of magic there. But the problem with the teachers that we have today, they may be further along in that conscious exploration. And when they're out there, some of them aren't. But there's a lot of teachers out there right now. And there's a lot of teachers that I'm kind of like, and the biggest problem with I find with teachers is they all get to a point where they feel like they have the ticket in order to get, they have the ticket for people to go on their personal journeys to get as far as possible. But they put themselves in a position that they are a requirement along that path.
It's about syntax. What you're speaking about is not teachers. You're speaking about people who are teaching. They're not the same thing. Someone who is actually a teacher hopes you graduate. They want you to complete the program. They want you to graduate. They want you to go off and be successful. Someone who is teaching values what they're offering above your progress. There's a huge difference. And so there are a lot of self-identified teachers who are just people teaching a thing. And that's not the same thing as being a teacher. Yeah. A true teacher wants you to graduate. They want you to succeed. So essentially, without them.
For a lot of people that are, maybe this is a good conversation to have. So if someone is just taking,
I found one.
Like someone's just taking the decision that they're going to start to explore themselves and who they are and go down this path of self-exploration. And all of a sudden they're going to start to look at the various ways. And sometimes they're going to come across, most likely they're going to come across some type of actual teacher or someone that is teaching something.
So just say they come across a teaching.
For sure. So what is the best way to discern if a teacher is right for you or not?
Right for you or not, they will speak in the language that you actually understand. There is an innate difference between someone who challenges you and someone who confuses you. And most people are so used to being traumatized by their own experience or disempowered by their own experience that they cannot tell the difference. And so someone who is speaking in a way that you really have to work to follow what they're saying, check and make sure that it's not because they're pushing you beyond your comfort zone versus they're just speaking a language you don't understand. And you can tell the difference, because when you're hearing someone who's teaching something that actually is in your language, there's this innate excitement that comes up. And then you may or may not retain the information. Most teachers will tell you, you don't need to remember everything they say. It's landing and it's going to come out when it needs to come out. And when you're ready for that step, I'll say it again, there's no impatience behind it. But if someone is responding with frustration that you're not understanding them or you're misinterpreting what they're saying, take a step back and see why. Now, I find that a lot. I get frustrated by people misusing information that I give them. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. I'll sit there in a session and I will watch someone twist what I just said to them and be like, oh yeah, based on what you just said, I totally fall in this category. I'm like, no, I literally just said the opposite. I just said you're over there and that's not a thing. And they will keep twisting it back to prove their own point. So there is a frustration about someone who's just not getting the message. But that's an example of that someone I know is not my student, because they're not understanding the language that I'm speaking in. They're there to use my own teachings or what's coming out of my mouth in order to prove or reinforce a predisposed belief. And so both as the teacher deciding who to invest in and as the student deciding who to invest in, you have to be very careful that you're speaking the same language. Now, you want someone who isn't comfortable, because if you're too comfortable, you're probably not going to make too much progress unless you're in that stage. If you're coming out of trauma, you need to be comfortable in order to be vulnerable enough to actually go into it. For example, people who come and float with you, they need to feel comfortable in order to go into the vulnerability of their practice, in order to actually start exploring what it is they need to do. So there's that part, but you're also not a teacher, you're a facilitator. And so there's a huge difference. You're not usually going to be comfortable with a teacher.
Well, and most practices that are in line with what we're talking about, or teachers that are teaching something, an actual teacher, most of the work is going to be done in self-isolation. It's going to be done in contemplation as you're exploring the concepts, you're meditating on them, you're playing with them, you're doing whatever. But it's going to be a journey by yourself.
Yeah. And they're just there to give you the next step or to poke you when you're getting too comfortable.
They're just a reflection.
Yeah.
They're kind of like a check-in. How's the progress going? How are things going? Yeah.
Or not even that, but just here's the next step to keep challenging you. One of the reasons I really like the self-isolation side of evolutionary, like conscious evolutionary practice, is because people can actually be honest with themselves. So, for example, there's a yoga studio real close to where we're sitting right now, and people like to go and practice together. They ride that wave of the communal breath and they do the practice together, and they find they get a deeper practice out of it. Sure. Then they leave the class, they socialize, they get in their car, they drive, they stop at a grocery store, then they get home. At what point in time did they actually face whatever was explored in their practice? By the time they actually have an opportunity to dive into the content that came up out of their practice, it's hours later, and most of it has been contaminated by cross-experiencing. And so the isolation side of what we're going through now, it actually highlights the process, because you can do a yoga class, you can do an exercise class, you can do a course by a teacher like myself who offers online classes in order to take you deeper into your thing, whatever that thing is. And you actually can't leave. After you've done the class, you're stuck with whatever just came up. And so you actually have the space and the availability to go into it and do your homework. That was one of the biggest things that I found running courses, is that people would come a month later and they hadn't done their homework. It's like, how do you want me to keep building on this if you haven't made a foundation yet? And so with the isolation, instead of just, okay, class over, turn on the TV, let's watch CNN.
Let it simmer.
Let it simmer, sit with it, let it
flesh itself out.
That's one of my favorite things. Yeah, let it flesh itself out.